So why did Bentley partner with Dodge Data and Analytics for this report? And what were some of the main goals in creating it?
One of the reasons for partnering with Dodge Data and Analytics on this was to help get us more of an outside perspective on things. Obviously, we work with our own users all the time. We're in constant contact with them for the products that they're using, the services we're providing. But we wanted to get a little bit of a broader swath than that. Wanted to get somebody who can reach out and get more of that. And also get, it's always helpful when you get an outside perspective to make sure that, we're not asking questions that are leading to a specific answer or looking for a pre-drawn conclusion on anything. So that was kind of the reason for, the reason for wanting to partner with them. And they're certainly, a very well qualified company to be able to assemble that for us. So some of the main goals were really looking at it to say, what can, obviously what can we do to learn about this and understand, our role as a technology provider is to make sure that we're providing tools that are useful and valuable to the marketplace. But part of it also, we really look at part of our responsibility is to be able to share that with other utilities as well, right? I know personally, I got into this industry because I want to see us make a difference in the way that we're able to provide these sorts of critical services for quality of life for people, and being able to share information at a broader industry level allows utilities to learn from each other and understand more clearly where they sit on that spectrum of maturity, look at other examples of how they might be able to improve and what sort of impact that has.
Okay, what were some of the results from the report that you found most important or most interesting?
I would say one of the key things that comes through that's both interesting and important is there's clearly a combination of technology pains, but also, I'll say, people-oriented pains. And the recognition that those two things need to go together, I think, is an important aspect of all of this. You can have the best tools in the world, but if your people are resistant to using them or don't learn how to use them properly, if your organization isn't set up in a way to actually leverage them and make better decisions because of what you've got, then it's really not, you're really not doing the most you can. You're not serving your ultimate purpose. And I think the results of the study certainly show that very clearly, that it's a combination of things that need to happen.
Okay, so what did Bentley Systems learn from the report, and how it affected the company's direction?
I think we were mostly encouraged by what we saw. I won't say there were any things in there that were really surprising overall, which is actually good for us, right? That's a good sign that we were the types of things that we're working on are already aligned with where the marketplace is, where these utilities need help, and so on. In particular, I think coming back to that point about technology, but also then needing help implementing that technology and getting people engaged with that technology, I think helps to reinforce a couple of things for Bentley as well. The technology itself, if you look at the report, there's a lot in there that talks about organizations that are still struggling with silos of data or limitations in how they can use things. Bentley's long-standing approach around being open, that openness and connectedness of different technologies, I think, serves well in that arena. And then the part of it about being able to effectively take these technologies and, again, implement them, right? Train people how to use them, connect them in a way that's useful and valuable. I think Bentley's approach with digital integration, I think, is an important. It's a reinforcing factor for that. So when we look at things like the digital waterworks relationship, right, having a digital integrator who's helping sort of push this ahead and teach others how to integrate as well, I think speaks to that aspect that the technology alone isn't enough. You can't do it just with the tool. You need to help the people adopt the tools as well.
Okay, so how does the water utility sector differ from other infrastructure sectors in terms of digital technology adoption?
So I think the biggest thing that we see is, some people tend to frame it as if water utilities are laggards when it comes to technology. They're behind. I don't really like that framing, because I don't think it's accurate that the water utilities are scared of technology or something like that. But they're definitely conservative about what they choose to do and when they choose to do it. And it's because if you're a water utility and you screw something up, there's a big consequence of that, right? So there's very much a desire in the water industry to make sure, first, to do no harm, right? Let's make sure that whatever we're doing, it doesn't cause more problems. It doesn't create a risk where there wasn't one before. So I think they tend to be more cautious because of that. And therefore, in terms of an overall timeline, if you look at adoption of some technologies, and you look at, say what happens in offshore, oil and gas, things like that, right? They tend to be really pushing, more the front edge of a lot of these technology waves, because they're more motivated by, the profits that are involved, or the timelines that they need to fit. Where I think, again, water utilities tend to be a little more reserved and a little bit more cautious in their planning of that. But I think, especially when you look at the impacts from COVID, we've definitely seen that the utilities who were already adopting the technology were more prepared. They were more able to adapt to the new circumstances, and I think that's going to really open a lot of eyes in terms of doing nothing is not a risk-free option.
Okay, so how can utilities bridge the data isolation problem cited in the report?
So this really comes back to sort of the core philosophies around a digital twin, and it comes back to those points about having openness and having connectedness. And I think that's an important distinction too. If you look at it can be confusing when you talk about a common data environment versus a connected data environment. The reality of it is there's never going to be one system that has every piece of data, everything in it, right? It's just not a feasible way for the world to work. So the idea of a common data environment, you might actually have several sort of common data environments. One related to maybe GIS oriented information, another one for SCADA and operational things, another for some engineering technologies or whatever. But it's the connected data environment where you're actually able to bring pieces of those together and have a single view of truth that allows you to actually then work with that and provide more meaningful data. So the whole concept of a digital twin is doing exactly that. It's taking these federated sources of different information, IT, OT, ET, bringing it all together and being able to expose it in ways that anybody anywhere in the organization can get benefit from it, whether it's an engineer using more of that data to do their work, it's an operator using more of that data to do their work, capital planner doing more of their work, whatever those things are. That's really, behind the scenes, that's what it takes to break down those silos. But again, back to one of the main points of the study being about the involvement of the people. One of the other key things to breaking down the silos is making sure that people actually understand what they can benefit from it. Why would I do this? I don't want to adopt technology for the sake of technology. I want to adopt it because it lets me do my job better. And so some of that comes back to teaching and advising more on what can be done. Some of that comes back to sharing more information about these types of reports and user stories that go into this, so people can see what happens elsewhere. And that's one of the ones where in the Águas de Porto story, for example, I realize Portugal's not North American, but there's a lot that North American utilities can learn from that example, because what they rolled out initially, when the rest of the organization started to see the benefits that their colleagues were having by using this, what started off as a sort of self-contained project turned into more and more and more people wanting to get access to this so that they could do their jobs better. And so I think that visibility sort of cross-pollination of insight that you start to get across the organization is key for that.
Okay, you talked a bit about one of the other problems said in the report about changing people's attitudes and perceptions. If you were talking directly to our engineering audience, how might you suggest that they help change these attitudes and to bring this change about faster?
So I think one of the best things that engineers can actually do to help accelerate these changes is to stop talking about engineering. Right, there's a tendency for engineers to want to get in, and it's in, I'll say, our nature. I am a PE, right? I speak from personal experience on this. There's a desire to want to explain how everything works and all the details of it and the complexities of it and things like that, and that can actually be off-putting to other people who could benefit from it if you just stuck to here's all you really need to know. And I keep looking at this from the standpoint of, I think you and I have even talked about it before, is like a weather forecast, right? Everybody uses apps on their phone all the time to check the weather and see if it's going to rain or not. Nobody wants to know about the details of how meteorological models work and the impacts of humidity and wind shifts and stuff, right? And I think that's where, if engineers can simplify the way they explain this to others and say, I'm not going to talk to you about modeling criteria. I'm not going to talk to you about pipe roughness coefficients. I'm not going to talk to you about, how the best efficiency point of a pump, is determined or how we monitor. What I am going to talk to you about is how I can provide a little bit of insight to help you know if you're operating those pumps correctly. And what I can do is I can provide some tools that will run automatically in the background that will tell you if we're at risk of a tank running dry, or that will tell you what the available fire flow is, or that will tell you, where you need to worry about if you have to isolate a certain section of pipe to deal with a burst or something like that. If the engineers can keep that interdepartmental discussion focused on the problems and the solutions, not the engineering, I think it'll do a world of good for helping to spread the value.
Okay, you mentioned that there weren't many surprises in the report. Is there maybe something that maybe caught you a little off guard?
I was a little surprised at how highly some organizations rank themselves. I was honestly expecting, not that the splits would necessarily be different, but I thought the averages would be a little bit lower in most places. And I don't know if that's I don't know if that's my view on the rankings, because I know how much more could be done. So I know how much farther the scale should go. So my metrics on it are maybe a little skewed from how most utilities see it themselves. Or maybe it's a matter of utilities really just kind of focusing more on their own peers, I'll say, and maybe also comparing largely with other American utilities where we know that there are other parts of the world that are in some ways ahead in some aspects of this. So it's a little bit surprised by that, but not wildly, right? It's not like everyone thinks they're awesome and I thought they were terrible or anything like that. It's more that I would have thought there'd be a few percentage point shifts in some of the maturity areas.
Can you describe what these rankings may have looked like? I'm not quite picturing it in my head.
Oh, so basically the series of questions ask things about how many how would you consider your systems in terms of their ability to be interconnected or things like that, and so some of them might say, 25% say they're good, 40% say they're moderate, things like that, and I would have thought maybe a few less good, a few less moderate, a few more in the poor range. It's hard to cite just one of those because again, there are 20 or 30 different questions that are all in that range. But in general, I would have thought there'd be a little bit of a wavelength shift down on some of those. It does imply to me that utilities really are thinking about this a lot more. right? If everyone was answering in the worst category for every question, it would tell me that we're miles and miles away from even approaching a solution. The fact that most of the utilities are at least in the beginning phases of trying to get some of these things working, I think is actually encouraging. It means that, right, it's easier once something is rolling to steer it in the good direction than if something's just sitting still.
How can anyone in the infrastructure industry learn from this report, and how can they improve their work based on this knowledge?
Again, different types of industries are definitely going to have different concerns, and those aren't always going to be the same as what you see for a water utility. So really looking at what the commonalities are, I think the areas that you're most likely to get the commonalities are not so much about the specifics of what problems they're trying to address. So not looking, for a water utility, right, it's not necessarily looking at the emergency response details of a water utility, pipe bursts and power outages and things like that. It's not necessarily looking at the specifics of capital planning for a water utility, but it is looking at the broader trends that you may see there. And I think the trends around, particularly around the people side of things, I think are echoed in other industries as well, and especially other utility-oriented industries as well. Right, a lot of the same things that a water utility might struggle with are going to be parallel to what you might struggle with if you're an electric utility or a gas utility. Certainly, some of the challenges around staff turnover, aging staff, things like that, are going to be similar.